Saches Nazir Daf Yud Beis contains one Mishnah towards the end of the daf, and it actually begins another Mishnah which continues on the next daf, which we won't get to. But the first part of the daf brings a halacha that has nothing to do with our Masechta directly. The Gemara will have a added halacha to that halacha and a kashas on it, and one of those kashas will be from the Mishnah we just learned. So let's begin. The Gemara comes of Yochanan. Yochanan says if somebody sends a shliach to be mekadesh a woman for him, and he does not say who he should be mekadesh or where he should be mekadesh her from, he does not give any limitations. He just says, "Go be mekadesh Nisha for me," and then that person disappears. He never comes back. So the sender is forbidden to marry any woman in the world because we assume that the shliach went and was mekadesh someone, and therefore every woman in the world could be her sister or daughter or mother or some relative of hers, which is forbidden for him to marry because he's mekudeshes to a close relative of hers. That's Rabbi Yochanan's halacha. Now, Rish Lakish asks a kasha on Rav Yochanan from a Mishnah discussing somebody who has a set of two birds, which he's bringing as karbanis. There are several karbanis which you have to bring two birds. One is a ola, and one is a chatas. So this Mishnah says if somebody takes two birds, a set, and he does not yet decide which one's the ola, which one's the chatas, and then one escapes and flies out to the world and is lost. So the halacha is, since the one that he has left is not designated for either purpose, he could still use it for any purpose that he wants. And therefore he could take another bird, bring it together with the one that he still has, and then decide which one is going to be the chatas and which one is going to be the ola. Now, Rish Lakish makes a diak here. It's only because he didn't set up yet which one is the chatas and which one is the ola. If, however, he did set one of them as a chatas and one of them as an ola, and then one of the birds escapes, and now you don't know where it is. So the implication is, first of all, he can't just bring another bird and match it to the one that he still has. And also the implication is that the only problem is with this bird that he has left. However, all the other birds in the world are fine. We don't have halacha that the rest of the birds in the world are a problem. So the question is why? Any bird in the world could be the bird that escaped, or any bird which could be the bird that escaped, and that's a specific carbon. It's either an ola or a chatas. So how could we use any of those birds for anything else? We don't know what it is. First of all, it might be one of these, and even if it's one of these, we don't know which one. So Yochanan responds, so therefore, Rish Lakish's kasha is, how could you say that when someone is sent to shliach, we don't know who he was mekudeshes to, we assume every woman in the world is it. If a bird escapes, we should assume every bird in the world is it. Obviously, we don't say that, so we shouldn't be afraid that every woman in the world is a sister of the one that he was mekadesh. So the Gemara goes over. Rav Yochanan responded and he said there's a very big difference. We have rules for when you have a majority. When do you have to be choshesh that a single entity that you found is the one minority that you're afraid of? So the rule is that if the mixture of the one which is permitted and forbidden to you are kavua, they are in their own place, and you're going to there, you have to assume it's 50-50. It is as if 50-50 odds that you will reach the one which is forbidden, and therefore you can't use it, it's usher. Now, in the case of the woman and the bird, the woman is in her place. The shliach went to her house, found her, was mekadesh her. So now she's kavua, so it's 50-50. However, in the case of the birds, the bird went and ran away. So therefore, the birds are flying around all over the place. They are not kavua. And if any bird comes to you, so it's not kavua, it's what we call kol de parish, a bird which came away from the mixture. And the rule is kol de parish miruba parish, you could assume that's from the majority. Now, if you want to say that that's very nice as far as the shliach, when the shliach went and he received the bird, but what happens when the woman then goes out to the market? Maybe somebody could go to the market and be mekadesh and isha there. That woman isn't in her house anymore. She left her house and came to him. So the Gemara says no, because she's going to go back to her house, and she returned to her house before when the man is mekadesh her. So therefore she goes back to being in a state of kavua. A bird, however, stays in a state of non-kavua, and therefore there is no kasha from that. Now, Rava now limits Rav Yochanan's halacha. Rava says, Rav Yochanan said any woman in the world is forbidden to him, but it's not really true because there are some women who cannot possibly be the relative of his wife, and that's a woman who has no relatives. So if he'll find a woman that does not have a daughter or a granddaughter from either her son or her daughter, and not a mother and not a grandmother that are alive, and not a sister. She doesn't have any of these relatives. In all these situations, she is definitely mutter for this man, as long as she didn't have these relatives, obviously, at the time that the shliach could have been mekadesher. Now, Rava goes further, and he says even if this woman had one of these relatives at the time that the shliach could have been mekadesher, she's still permitted as long as these relatives were married and therefore unavailable at the time that the man made the shliach, not at the time that the shliach was mekadesh, at the time that the man made the shliach. And the reason is because when a man makes a shliach, he does not make a mashiach for anything which is not available. And therefore, at the time that he made the shliach, if this woman's relatives were all married, even if they got divorced later, and they theoretically could have been mekadesh, but he didn't make him a shliach to be mekadesh them because he only made a shliach for a woman who was mutter to him at the time and available to him at the time. These women, who are the relatives of some other woman that he wants to marry, these women were all married at the time. Therefore, the woman that he wants to marry did not have any relatives available, and there is no shichas that could have referred to them. So that's the halacha that Rava says limits Rav Yochanan, limits the halacha which Rav Yochanan said. Now, the Gemara has a kasha on that from our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, we saw that if somebody says, I am a Nazir, and I want to bring a carbon Nazirim, that means I want to bring the karbanos, I want to be Menadiv, the karbanos for a different Nazir, will become chayev a karbanos. So he's chayev both in his Nazirs and in those karbanos which he promised to bring. Now, if somebody else hears and says, me too, I also want to be a Nazir, and I also want to bring those karbanos, he's also chayev. Now, the Mishnah continued and said, if they're smart, they'll swap karbanos with each other. So Gemara asks, I understand the second person at the time that he said that he wants to bring a karbanos, there was an existing Nazir already. That was the first one. But the first one, at the time he was Menadeh of karbanos, what Nazir is there out there? Doesn't know of any Nazir. How could it be a Makabel karbanos that don't exist? Now, the Gemara says this is the kasha on Rava, because the Gemara had understood Rava that the reason why the shlichus doesn't happen is because the person doesn't think about making shlichus on something which doesn't exist. So here, you would have to say that a person doesn't think about being a Makabel karbanos of a Nazir that does not exist. However, here you see clearly that he does. So if that's true, so when a person makes a shlichus, he could also be thinking about some shlichus to be Mekadesh and Isha, which is not available at the time. So Gemara therefore changes the pshat in what Rava said. The Gemara says, no, a person does not make a shliach on something which he can't do himself. He's aware of it, and he thinks of it. However, he's not going to tell a shliach to do something he can't do himself, and therefore he did not appoint him to do that. And therefore, in the case of Rava, the shlichus to be Mekadesh and Isha that's married is not chal. However, in our case, where it's not about shlichus, it's not about appointing someone to do something, you do think of being mekabel a set of karbanos, even if those karbanos don't exist yet. The Gemara now asks the kasha on this idea. You're telling me a person can't make a shliach about something he can't do himself? I'll show you that he can. It's a case where somebody, we have a Mishnah which we learned in Maseches Nedarim, somebody appoints a guardian, an apotropos, to be meifir any neder that his wife is going to make while he's away. That is, a husband has a right to be meifir, to cancel any nedarim that his wife will create within 24 hours of when she creates it. This man is traveling away and is afraid his wife isn't going to make an nedarim in his absence. So he points an apotropos to say, I'm making you a shliach to appoint anything while I'm away until I come back. Now, what's the halacha there? So the Mishnah says it's a machlokes. According to the Tana Kama, he can't be meifir because you cannot make a shliach to be meifir nedarim. The Torah says isha yikimena v'isha yifirena. Only a husband can do it. Rabbi Shai and Rabbi Yonasan say no, you can. Shluchas shadam k'mayse, it works. Says the Gemara. Let's analyze this. The person could not have been meifir these nedarim himself. We have a brisa that says if somebody says any future nedarim my wife make are mufar, that doesn't work. Or at least it's a machlokes. Rav Elazar says it works, and the Chacham say it does not work. Now, therefore, assuming that does not work, that means that the person himself, the husband, could not have been meifir future nedarim. How did he make a shliach to be meifir future nedarim? According to the rule you just told me, that someone can't make a shliach to do something that he can't yet do himself. So Gemara answers, it's very simple, really, because there's a machlokes whether or not he could do it himself. Rabbi Elazar says he can do it himself. So Rabbi Shaya, who says that he can make a shliach, is going according to Rabbi Elazar, who says he can do it himself. And the Tanakama is going according to the Chachamim, who say he cannot do it himself, and therefore he cannot do a hafara. In truth, even not according to that opinion, you have the pasuk Isha Yikimenu, Isha Yiferenu, you have a special there's a kasuk, and therefore it does not have to be according to that opinion. So the Gemara asks, if we're going like Rabbi Eliezer, who says that he could do it himself, so in this mission, why didn't he just do it himself? What's the point in making up a Shabbos? So my answer is no, he's afraid he's going to forget, or he's afraid that he will be angry in the future, and therefore he wants to set up an apotropos to do it for him on his behalf. Now we get to the next Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses a phrase where somebody is makabel upon himself to bring a carbon for a Nazir, but he says a half Nazir. Now, when you say a half Nazir, when you say you're makabel, what the phrase that's used is legaleach chatzi Nazir, to shave half a Nazir, what you mean is to pay for one of the two korbanos that a Nazir has to bring at the time that his Nazir's ends. So the Mishnah says, if somebody says, Harei alai legaleach chatzi Nazir, I accept upon myself to shave half a Nazir, meaning to pay for one of his korbanos, and his friend hears and he says, me also, I also accept upon myself to shave half a Nazir. So you have a machlokes what halach is. According to the Tanakama, they both have to bring a full set of korbanos Nazir, 2 korbanos each. There's no such thing as half a Nazir. This language of Kabbalah is a full Kabbalah. That is Rabbi Meir's opinion. The Chachamim say, no, each one brings half, and therefore each one brings one of the 2 korbanos they can share together. Now, Rav explains the machlokes. Rav says there's 3 possible cases here. The machlokes is in only one of them. If he would have said half the korbanos of a Nazir, so that would be clear. He's makabel one of the 2 korbanos. That works according to everybody. If he says the korbanos of half a Nazir, no such thing as half a Nazir. Nazirs can't be accepted in halves, and therefore it's meaningless. And he's makabel a full korban. The only machlokes is in this exact lashon where he says harei olai legaleach chatzi Nazir. He says harei olai. And therefore he's makabel upon himself, and then he says chatzi Nazir, which makes no sense. So how do you explain this? So Rabbi Meir says, and he says harei olai is mechayiv, and he says chatzi Nazir tries to limit it with something that makes no sense, and therefore he's left with his original chiyuv. The Chachamim say no, it's all one statement, and he said he's makabel upon himself something which does not exist, and therefore he's not chayiv full korbanos at all.